Hi everyone, coming at you with another top 10 video. So since the movie It is coming out this weekend, which is based on Stephen King's novel by the same name, I figured it'd be a perfect time to talk about some of my all-time favorite Stephen King movies. Stephen King is one of the most prolific writers of the last 40 years. He has written hundreds of novels, novellas, and short stories, many of which have been made into films and TV miniseries. Though he is best known for writing horror, he has written several stories in the genres of sci-fi and drama. I am a huge fan of the films by Stephen King. While I haven't read a lot of his books, the ones I've read are Carrie, Cujo, I've read like half of It, and I've read several of the Night Shift's short stories. But other than that, I've mostly just watched his films. But the films I really enjoy. While there are some bad ones and some really laughably bad ones, there are quite a few good ones. There's just something about Stephen King films that draw me into them. They have a real Spielbergian vibe in the sense that a lot of them take place in small towns and suburbs, like a lot of early Spielberg films. And they're, sometimes, like in the case of Stand By Me or It, about kids going up against some evil force or going on some adventure or whatever. And beyond that, they just feel like great little horror tales that you could tell around the campfire with a bunch of friends. And it's just a warm, spooky feeling to his stories. So before I start my list, here are just a few honorable mentions. The first one is 1408. It is a film I have not seen in a long time, but I remember it being good, chilling, psychological ghost film. Cat's Eye is an anthology film in which there are 3 stories that are all connected by a cat. It is a fun movie, and honestly the first 2 stories are a little creepy. Cujo, a story about family drama having to be pushed aside when they are confronted by a rabid St. Bernard. By the end, it becomes a good, scary story about a mother and son trapped in a car. Christine, directed by the great John Carpenter. Christine is about a nerdy boy finally getting a break when he buys a 1958 Plymouth Fury. It's a film that plays with the idea of an evil car that preys on the psyche of its owner, and it works really well. Pet Sematary, it's about a father played by Dale Metcalf who is grieving over the loss of his child Gage in a tragic car accident, so he buries him in a cursed pet cemetery to bring him back. This film does an excellent job of discussing loss and how to react to a tragedy, how does God fit into it, and all those kind of ideas. How to talk to your kids about a loved one dying, be it a pet or even their sibling. And it's really effective in that way, and you really feel bad for this guy who's going through this. Oh, and the kid actor who comes back as a zombie is freaking creepy. And finally, the last honorable mention is It. Yes, the original miniseries from 1990 has problems, especially in the second half. However, what is good in this miniseries are the kid actors. They have really good chemistry together as the Losers Club, and I really get into their story as they try to band together to face off against this evil force of supernatural nature. There are genuinely creepy scenes in the first half of the miniseries, such as, of course, the sewer scene and even the opening when we first see Pennywise. It's creepy. It's him just staring at this little girl through the sheets, just growling at her, basically. It is really creepy looking. So there are some creepy moments in this miniseries. It's not perfect. It's got its problems. But of course, I can't not talk about Tim Curry. While he's not exactly terrifying as Pennywise, he is very memorable as Pennywise, and he is an over-the-top, fun character to watch. Yeah, and that's not really what you want from Pennywise, which is why I'm excited for the new It, but hey, for what it is, I enjoy it. So yeah, that's my honorable mentions. Now on to my top 10. Number 10, Salem's Life, directed by the late Tobe Hooper. The 1979 Salem's Life miniseries is a chilling, atmospheric vampire story. It is really creepy. Meant to be King's version of Dracula in America, it is filled with atmosphere and suspense. It has a creepy score as well as haunting imagery. I will never, ever be able to unsee the iconic scene where the little vampire kid is outside his friend's window asking for him to let him in and just clawing at the window, and there's fog behind him and he's floating there. That is the stuff of nightmares. It's a haunted house story and a vampire tale all rolled into one. I love scary movies about vampires, and this is one of the best. Number 9, Children of the Corn. based on the short story by the same name. The original Children of the Corn is still a cult classic and has actually gone on to be the longest running franchise based on any Stephen King work, with 7 sequels and a remake. This original film, for me at least, does hold up. It's about a group of kids who, under their cult leader Isaac, kill off all the adults in the small town of Gatlin, Nebraska. A few years later, a couple is driving through Nebraska when they come across the small town and have to try and escape with their lives. This film not only works as a chilling horror film, but it discusses things like religion and believing everything you hear. Even as a Christian, I do appreciate that this film discusses being able to think for yourself. Not to mention, this is just a creepy horror story. It has an unsettling score, and the kid actors are great, especially Jonathan Franklin as Isaac and Courtney Gaines as Malachi. Those two make this film. This film also managed to make cornfields creepy, so good on them. Also, Linda Hamilton's in this, who was of course in The Terminator, which came out this same year as this, so that's a little fun fact. Number 8, The Mist. Directed by Frank Darabont, this film is about what happens when a group of people are trapped in an enclosed location by something outside. It's about a bunch of people that are trapped in a convenience store in a small town when this strange mist rolls in. In the mist seems to be giant creatures, and it is unsafe to go outside. This film really has a great Lord of the Flies feel, as the people are slowly divided on two sides against one another. This film is all about how people react in a crisis situation, and the ridiculous and horrible things they will do in order to survive. It really plays on paranoia, and fear of the other outside, and goes back to those old Hitchcock tropes that you saw in The Birds, and movies like The Thing, which I know it's not Hitchcock, but movies like The Thing do this really well, where it's a group of people are being attacked by something and they start turning on each other. And The Mist really utilizes that idea to the nth note and does a really good job of doing so. Number 7 is The Dead Zone. Christopher Walken brings an excellent performance in this film. He plays a man who, after waking from a 5-year coma, is able to see people's future and warn them of tragic events to occur. However, once he touches the hand of a politician, played by Martin Sheen, he discovers that if he is elected, he will start nuclear fallout. So Christopher Walken has to decide what to do. This is a great film that people really don't talk about enough. It discusses philosophical and ethical issues. Like, for instance, is it okay to commit murder if it's committing that murder will save humanity in the long run? It goes back to the classic question, if you could kill Adolf Hitler when he was young, would you? It also works as a sad tale about a guy who lost 5 years of his life and what that does to a person. It's a fantastic movie that, even if you aren't into King's more scary stories, this is one you should definitely see. It's not really scary, it's much more sci-fi. Check it out. Number 6, Creepshow. Creepshow is an anthology film directed by the master of horror, George Romero. It has 5 different little horror stories, all of which are fun. I particularly like the ones called Father's Day and The Crate. Even Stephen King stars in one of the segments. His acting is... Holy old Jesus! Not great. That being said though, I really enjoy this film. It has a charm to it and a real sense of dark play. It has a comic book feel to it, literally, because through each segment, the way it segues is they show comic strips, and it's all of, basically the stories are coming from this comic book that this kid at the beginning of the movie is reading, based on the old EC comics from the 50s, the Tales from the Crypts and all that. Each individual story feels like its own campfire tale. It's a perfect film for the Halloween season to watch with a bunch of friends at a Halloween party.
Creepshow. The most fun you'll ever have being scared.
Number 5, Carrie, directed by Brian De Palma. Based on King's first novel, Carrie from 1976 is a sad story about an outcast girl named Carrie. She is the lowest on the social ladder in school and really everyday life. However, that may change when she discovers she has telekinesis. She gets invited to her high school prom and, well, I won't spoil it for you if you don't know, but let's just say it doesn't go well. Carrie is a really sad story about bullying and the cruelty of high school. You feel sorry for Carrie as she not only has to deal with extreme bullying, but also her crazy religious extremist mother. Carrie is sometimes considered a horror villain, but she really isn't. I don't even really get that. She is really only reacting to the bullying, and again, without going into it too much, she just finally snaps at the end of the film. Honestly, her character plays out more like the Wolfman or a Greek tragedy, Which, okay, yeah, the Wolfman's a horror character. But I guess what I'm meaning is her character is always paired with, like, Freddy Krueger and Jason. You know, these really, like, horrible, like, slashers and monsters and stuff. And it's like, she's not really. She was just trying to be a good person and live her life, but something inside of her awoke and she was pushed over that line. And even at the end of the film, she is still sympathetic because the way it's played, it's like she doesn't really have any control over that scenario. Unlike, of course, the 2013 remake, which basically turns Carrie into Phoenix from X-Men The Last Stand. This original Carrie, though, is a terrific film. Definitely check it out. Number 4 is The Shawshank Redemption. It is another film directed by Frank Darabont. Do I even have to talk about this film? Everyone and their mother has already praised the hell out of it. While I don't think it is one of the best films ever made because it's number 1 on IMDb, therefore it's true. I don't follow that, but I will say it is a damn good film. Tim Robbins is excellent in the role of Andy Dufresne, and Morgan Freeman's acting is just amazing. I mean, come on, this is the film that made him the go-to narrator. The story is great. You really feel for the ones in the prison that are trying to do better with their lives. It's an incredible drama. Check it out. Number 3 is Misery. Misery is about a writer named Paul Sheldon, played by James Caan, who gets into a car accident during a snowstorm. He is saved by Annie Wilkes, played by Kathy Bates, who is his number 1 fan. She seems nice at first, but once she reads his final book in the Misery series, she shows her true psychotic colors. This movie is unsettling as hell. It really plays with the fear of what it would be like to be trapped with a mentally unstable person who is obsessed with you. James Caan does an excellent job, mostly just acting in a bed. He doesn't really get to do a whole lot as an actor, but react. And he does a lot with that role. You really feel for him as he is put through everything, as he is forced to rewrite a book that he just wanted to write and be done with the series in the first place. And Kathy Bates, where do I even begin? She is terrifying as Annie Wilkes. She won an Oscar for her role, and it is well deserved. And by the way, when do you ever hear about that happening for a horror movie? All I can think of is Anthony Hopkins as Hannibal Lecter. Those came out like 1 year after the other, so maybe the Academy was just really nice back then. Or the more likely scenario that these two performances are that freaking terrific. And I'm going with the second one because Kathy Bates is terrific in this film. She's terrifying how she can just snap any second. She can go from being really nice, but if you say the wrong thing, she'll snap and just turn into this completely different person. And as Paul Sheldon slowly finds out more about her, it gets even more and more intense and creepy. And of course, I gotta talk about the best scene, the hobbling scene. Even thinking about that scene makes me cringe. It's one of the few horror scenes that I've seen many times, but I still have to turn away when watching it. I'm not that kind of viewer when it comes to horror movies. I'm usually fine. I love horror movies, but that is just cringy because it's like you feel it when you see it almost. You just feel so bad for this guy who goes through this. It's a terrific thriller. If you haven't seen it, definitely check it out. Number 2 is The Shining. The classic film directed by the master himself, Stanley Kubrick, is still, to this day, one of the scariest horror films ever made. While it does stray from what the book was going for, to the point that King himself hates this film, it is still an extremely effective horror film. It is about a man going insane and succumbing to cabin fever, and his son, who with his psychic powers, has to stop him from killing him and his mother. Jack Nicholson does a terrifying performance as Jack Torrance. While you don't feel sympathy for him in the film, like you do for the character in the book, he still plays falling into madness really well. By the end, you are legitimately scared of him. The movie has a lot of great atmosphere. Kubrick used a lot of wide shots and foreshadowing to really get into the psyche of the audience and really just scare the hell out of them. The scene where Danny is on his big wheel riding around the hallways and runs into the twin girls is still really scary. I love this movie. It's one of my all-time favorite horror movies. Number 1 is Stand By Me. Stand By Me is not only my favorite Stephen King film, it is one of my all-time favorite films. Like, top 5 worthy. I love everything about this film. I love the dynamic between the 4 boys. I love the coming of age story. I love that Rob Reiner and Stephen King perfectly captured boyhood. It's a film that you can relate in some way to each of the kids, or see how there was a kid like one of these kids in your own childhood. It captures the feeling of being with your friends when you were a kid and what it's like to look back on those times as an adult. And the ending still makes me tear up every time I watch it. It brings me back to childhood and the memories of hanging out with friends. Not only that, it's an extremely well-made film. Rob Reiner directed this film excellently. He brought great performances out of all 4 of the kids. There's a terrific line at the end of this film that stands out to me. I think there's so much truth in that statement. It is incredibly hard to stay in touch with those childhood friends, and when you're an adult with responsibilities, you really can't do adventurous things like you did when you were a kid. At least on a whim, anyway. This movie is an incredible film, and it is one of my all-time favorite movies. If you haven't seen a lot of King, if you don't like horror, that's fine. See this one, for sure. Just see it already if you haven't. So that was my top 10 list of Stephen King films, but I want to hear what your top 10 is. Leave it in the comments below because, hey, this is just my opinion. You know, maybe a film that I didn't mention was that you really like wasn't on here. I'd be curious to know what that is. But yeah, leave a comment, let me know, and I'm really excited to go see it this weekend. But until next time, I'll see you later. Bye.